1963. A Kurdish shepherd is walking his flock across a dry limestone hillside in southeastern Turkey, 6 miles from the ancient city of Urfa. He hears the bells on his sheep go quiet. He looks down. Carved stone, half buried in the dirt. He tells someone in his village. Word reaches the museum in Urfa. 2 university teams, one from Istanbul, one from Chicago, had come to look. They take notes, and then they leave. Their report describes the stones as the remains of a medieval Islamic cemetery. Unremarkable, not worth excavating. The file is closed. The hill sits untouched for 31 years. Then in October 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt comes to the same hillside. He looks at the same stones, and he does not see a cemetery. What he sees changes the entire timeline of human civilization, not by a few decades, not by a century, by 7,000 years. Here is what we are taught about how civilization began. Hunter-gatherers roamed the land in small bands. Over thousands of years, they learned to cultivate crops and domesticate animals. Agriculture created surplus food. Surplus food allowed permanent settlements. Permanent settlements created complexity, division of labour, specialisation, hierarchy. Hierarchy eventually produced religion, ceremony and monumental construction. In that order. Always in that order. Farming first, temples second. The timeline was settled. The sequence was agreed upon by every major archaeological institution in the world. And then Schmidt started digging. What he found beneath that hillside in Turkey was not a footnote to the established timeline. It was a direct, physical, undeniable contradiction of it. The megaliths at Göbekli Tepe predate Stonehenge by some 6,000 years. Let that number settle for a moment. Stonehenge, the most famous prehistoric monument on Earth, is considered ancient. It was constructed approximately 3000 BCE. Ancient Egyptians were already building pyramids before the final phase of Stonehenge was completed. Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge by around 6,000 years and was composed of large circles of T-shaped columns, most of which weigh between 15 and 20 tons and some up to 60 tons. Not stone chips, not hand-sized rocks, 60-ton carved limestone pillars, standing 3 to 6 meters tall, decorated with sophisticated relief carvings of animals, symbols and human figures, arranged in precise circular enclosures on the top of a hill in southeastern Turkey, built by people who, according to everything we understood about that era, should not have been capable of building them. Schmidt found many stone tools at Gobekli Tepe, and while he also found a large quantity of animal bones, he didn't find any evidence of either domesticated animal species or domesticated plants or grains. No farming, no domesticated animals, no pottery, no metal tools, no writing, no wheels. Just 60-ton pillars covered in sophisticated carvings, organised in carefully designed circular enclosures on a hilltop built by people who are supposed to be too busy surviving to build anything like this. Before the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists believed that societies in the early Neolithic were organised into small bands of hunter-gatherers, and that the first complex religious practices were developed by groups that had already mastered agriculture. Göbekli Tepe did not fit that belief. Göbekli Tepe preceded it. Religion did not follow farming. Farming may have followed religion. That is not a small revision. That is the entire story told backwards. Before I show you the part that no one fully explains, the part that kept me awake the first time I read about it, I want you to tell me something. What do you think the carvings on those pillars mean? Because Schmidt spent 20 years trying to answer that question and died before he could. Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one. Now here is what the official account mentions and then moves past almost immediately. The excavators of Göbekli Tepe believe that around 8000 BCE, the people at the site deliberately buried the monuments under mountains of soil and settlement refuse, flints and animal bones brought from elsewhere. Deliberately. That word appears in the official record. Not buried by time, not buried by erosion, not buried by conquest or collapse or catastrophe. Deliberately buried by the people who built it. Think about what that requires. Göbekli Tepe is around 30 times larger than Stonehenge. Its enclosures contain at least 200 massive stone pillars across more than 20 circular structures. To bury that, deliberately, required transporting thousands upon thousands of tons of soil, flint, and animal bone from elsewhere, and piling it over every pillar, every carving, every structure, until the entire complex was sealed beneath the hill. That was not accidental. That was a project that required the same level of organised human coordination as building the site in the first place. They built it, then they buried it, with the same hands, with the same coordination, with the same effort, perhaps more. To bury Göbekli Tepe was to erase something visible, to hide it from the living world. That choice suggests reverence, fear, or both. Now here is what makes this impossible to file away as a simple archaeological curiosity. About 90% of the site remains unexcavated. Archaeologists estimate 150 or more years of work left. At least 15 more enclosures lie buried. One may date to 15,000 BCE. That would predate Göbekli Tepe itself by 3,000 years. Something older than the oldest known site may be sitting beneath the oldest known site. Still sealed, still buried, still waiting. And we have excavated less than 10% of it. Now let us talk about Pillar 43, because this is where the thread goes somewhere that the official explanation has never fully addressed. A 2024 study in Time and Mind argues that Pillar 43's carvings may represent a lunisolar calendar, recording a catastrophic comet impact around 10,850 BCE. Pillar 43, the Vulture Stone, is the most analysed carving at the site. It shows a vulture with a circle on its wing, a headless human body beneath a scorpion, a series of other animals and symbols arranged with a precision that appears, to multiple independent researchers, to encode astronomical information, not decoration, not mythology, a calendar, a record, a message carved in stone at 9,600 BCE by people with no writing, no pottery, no agriculture, and left there, buried under thousands of tons of deliberately placed soil for whoever came next. Graham Hancock describes it as a deliberate time capsule. They left it there finally at the end, burying it, sealing it as a time capsule, untouched for more than 10,000 years. Now consider the full picture. A site so sophisticated it overturns the entire established timeline of human civilization, built by people with no agriculture, no metal, no writing, who somehow coordinated the transport and carving of 60-ton limestone pillars and decorated them with a symbolic vocabulary we still cannot fully read, then buried, deliberately, systematically, completely, in an act that required as much coordination as building it. The enclosures were systematically backfilled with rubble, flint and animal bones. The site decommissioned and sealed around 8,000 BCE, and then silence, for 10,000 years, until a Kurdish shepherd heard his bells go quiet. Now step back, because this is where Göbekli Tepe stops being a fascinating archaeological anomaly and becomes something much harder to explain away. The site was first visited by professional archaeologists in 1963. It was recognised as an archaeological site during a large-scale survey project conducted by the universities of Istanbul and Chicago in 1963, and dismissed. 2 university teams, one from Istanbul, one from Chicago. They looked at the carved stones of the oldest monumental construction ever found on Earth and wrote them off as a medieval cemetery. That is not incompetence. The university teams of the 1960s were not careless. These were professional researchers with training and experience, and yet they looked at what Klaus Schmidt would immediately recognise in 1994 as T-shaped Neolithic pillars and saw nothing worth excavating. Göbekli Tepe was first examined and dismissed by University of Chicago and Istanbul University anthropologists in the 1960s. Examined and dismissed, then rediscovered, then excavated, then found to predate every prior assumption about when organised human religion and monumental construction was possible by thousands of years. And here is the detail that stays with me. Schmidt spent 20 years at the site. He dedicated roughly 20 years to the site after recognising its significance in 1994. Schmidt, 61, died due to a heart attack during a vacation to Germany on July 20th, 2014. He never saw its full extent excavated, and several of the most significant recent discoveries came after his death. The man who recognised what the site was, the man who spent 20 years trying to understand why it was built and why it was buried, died before he could finish. The current excavations are led by Necmi Karel as part of the broader Stonehills project under the coordination of the Turkish Ministry of Culture and Tourism, and 90% of the site remains untouched. There is a site that overturned the entire timeline of human civilization, and the official decision, the deliberate institutional decision, is to leave 90% of it buried, because of preservation concerns, because future technology may read it better, because some things, it appears, are not yet ready to be uncovered, the same logic perhaps that led the people who built it to bury it in the first place.